start again.
Okay.
All right, we're here today with Elizabeth Fishel, who has just written an amazing book called When Will My Grown-Up Kid Grow Up? Loving and Understanding Your Emerging Adult. Elizabeth, this is a big topic, isn't it?
It is.
So what propelled you to write this book?
Well, I have two sons who are now 29 and 26, but as they started finishing high school and heading to college, I began to see that my relationship with them, there would still be a strong one, but it would very much change. It wasn't over, even though the 18 years of having them at home, the sort of hands-on family dinners and carpooling and all of that, that was coming to an end. But we would still have a very important relationship, even though they were off to college, and then when they returned, and they might bounce back, and so forth. And so I wanted to explore what did that relationship look like, and how could we keep a really strong bond, which we had had all along, and yet how could I give them room to really come into their own? Because that's what you want, of course, for your 20-somethings. You want them to take ownership for their own lives.
As you say, it's a delicate dance.
It is.
I like
it's
that.
a delicate balance between the sort of staying connected and the stepping back. And that's one of the themes of the book, and one of the things that we've tried to talk about with every topic we cover, their work choices, their love relationships, their money matters. I mean, for instance, as one man we interviewed said about their love and relationship choices, their partner is the biggest choice they'll ever make, and you really have no say in the matter. So you have to get used to the fact that you just don't have the kind of control that you had when your kids were little.
Indeed. Also, I mean, parents are often struggling with their own issues, for instance, money issues or love issues or work issues. So trying to advise a child when you might be in the middle of issues.
Absolutely. You know, we talk about the parallel journey that parents are going on. So the young people, and this is a book about 18 to 29-year-olds in this period that we call emerging adulthood that I'll talk about in a moment. But during those years, parents are also asking themselves many of the same questions. They're sort of redefining their lives. They're re-emerging as their children are emerging, as they're no longer tied down to 24/7 parenting. They have more time in their lives. They may be looking at their relationships, their marriages, their careers, and certainly money matters. And maybe their career is at a standstill, maybe they've been downsized, maybe they're wondering if and when they can ever retire, and they're reevaluating, just as young people are sort of trying to figure out, what am I doing next, what's my path. Their parents are saying what's for the rest of our lives, what's the next chapter going to bring.
Indeed, and in this day and age, we're all facing a world that's earmarked by change. And
Yes.
so there is no guidebook for us, except perhaps what you're doing here, which I think we will all be able to profit from, because it is a bit of a mystery, and it's an uncharted journey. And,
Absolutely.
so thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we think of it as sort of the last parenting book you'll ever need for
That's great.
this particular stage. But
wow.
Parenting goes on for the rest of our lives. But this is a particular turning point, and it can be filled with anxiety. I'll talk a little bit about the emerging adulthood period, which has sort of newly been defined, maybe over the last 5 or 10 years. Social scientists began to realize that many of the milestones that young people used to reach, say in the 1960s, that young people used to reach for ending college, for graduation, for marriage and parenthood, and other work decisions have been postponed. So, in the 60s, those milestones were often reached in the early 20s, and now for our kids today, they're being reached in the later 20s or even the early 30s. So that means it's a longer period for young people to have time to explore their options, and it may mean fewer regrets later on. It also might mean that young people are more mature when they try to make lasting decisions, whether it's about a job or a marriage or having children. I mean, the 28-year-old or the 31-year-old knows herself or himself a lot better than, the young person in the early 20s. But at the same time, all those years are now opening up, and so there's a lot more tumult and time for anxiety, but both for young people and certainly for their parents. As both sides are wondering, will I make it? Will my kid find a path? Will they be financially independent? Will they find a good job? Will they find a life partner? And there's a lot more cycling through relationships and jobs than I think there was 30 or 40 years ago. So, for instance, with work lives, young people, in this period, 18 to 29, may switch jobs 7 to 10 times is the average, rather than, getting one good job after college and just staying with it.
No, nothing, like I say, everything is so fluid.
Yeah.
One of the things that strikes me as we talk is that the way our parents treated this period for us, I don't know about you, but being a young artist, I went through my own period of tumult in my 20s, and I think my parents were essentially completely clueless, had no idea what to do with me or how to handle me. And so there is a whole new style of parenting that we grew into, which some have called overly permissive parenting, but and others have called it helicopter parenting, some of these derogatory terms. I frankly think we did a pretty damn good job, but
Definitely.
So the whole concept of emerging adulthood, is that something that is a phenomenon of the way we were parenting? Is this not the emerging adulthood, but kids coming back home and delaying their maturity? Not that it's ever in our hands, but is this something that is a result of this quote-unquote helicopter parenting, or do you think it's just a matter of the day and age we live in with all the particular stresses and economic issues, global concerns?
Absolutely.
How do you parse that one?
Well, for sure, there are social and economic factors, and particularly now with the economy, we're rebounding, but it's still tight and harder to get work and harder to, a lot of young people might be employed, but they're sort of underemployed, and housing costs are high, and so it's just a lot more difficult to survive on one's own. But I also think that our parenting style, of the generation, the sort of boomer generation, is so much more hands-on and child-centric. I think our parents just, not all of them, but there was a little bit of a feeling of, kids should be seen and not heard, or, kids should just sort of benign neglect. Well, let's just put it that way. And, if a couple went out to a restaurant, they just went on their own. They didn't bring the whole family along with them. Whereas I think in our generation, the focus has been on entwining our lives with our kids. If we go out for dinner, even with a toddler, that toddler comes along. And so I think, by and large, it's been a very good thing. There is a closeness and an intimacy between our generation and our kids, and I think it's very natural that we would want to continue it. And even though there's been some bad press about the whole boomeranging phenomenon, where the college graduate or the young person who's just lost a job in his 20s comes home and lives with mom and dad. The research that we did showed that, well more than half of families are really happy with that situation, and it gives them, another chance to be close to their kids and maybe teach them a few last things that they didn't get a chance to do the first time around, and get to be with them as the young adults that they're becoming. So, if it goes on and on and on, then parents are understandably start to get anxious. But if it's just a way station on the way to another time of life, I think by and large it's a positive thing. And in so many cultures, it's the given. In Hispanic cultures, in African American cultures, it's absolutely a given that multiple generations will live together.
Right. And Asian and
Asian as
European.
Yeah. No, I think it's really ours, where the young person is pushed out of the nest, has really been the exception. And I think now we're sort of, our pattern just may very well be what it is in many cultures around the world.
Yeah, we're getting a bit more real, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
But I'd like to go back to this concept of the emerging adulthood and the concept of the emerging parenthood, or I don't know, how did you phrase that, where our generation is really starting to examine their role in general, because obviously the idea of retirement for quote-unquote the boomer generation is a non-starter at this point. I think we're all looking at a wider world with a lot more opportunities, based on the fact we're going to live a lot longer. We're healthier people.
Absolutely.
And so maybe you could expand a bit on
Yes,
that.
yeah. Yes, I was saying, the emerging adulthood sort of parallels the re-emerging for their parents. And I love the word rewirement rather than retirement, that as you say, there's this extra chapter, with the grace of God, period of time from 60 to 80 or 90, and which, by the way, our grown kids are also going to have, and it's one of the reasons why there's sort of a feeling of, why rush through the 20s? They're going to have longer lives. They'll be living to their 80s and 90s. And so, take a little longer to sort of cook and develop. And then parents as well are, their children's departure for college doesn't really time with the wind down of their career for most people, and particularly now after the financial crises and pressures. And so there is sort of this sense of, what are we going to do with the rest of our lives? Will we take on a different career, the Encore career? Will we do something part-time? Will we try to work at home in some new way? There are a lot of 60 and 70-year-old entrepreneurs, and will we go in that direction? So it's not just 20-year-olds with startups, but now 60 and older are also moving in that direction.
I think I read a fact recently, I don't remember the precise percentage, but something like new companies, and something like 60% of them are being started by people either over 50 or 60, which is like, yay!
I know,
team.
I know, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm proud of our demographic. And it's interesting. I mean, we definitely interviewed families where, both young person and parent were in a startup, or both were looking for a new job, and so there can be some like commiseration and support. And it can also be a little stressful. I mean, if the parent is not really, gainfully, firmly employed, and the young person also needs some financial help, that can certainly be stressful. But there's also that, that sense of camaraderie
yes.
and possibility.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, what was the biggest surprise that came out of all your research? I understand you worked with Jeffrey Jensen Arnett, PhD.
Yes.
So you're well researched. So tell me something about it.
Yeah. Jeff Arnett and I did a lot of research together, and he also had been spending 20 years looking at what he called, because he really named this period emerging adults, the 18 to 29-year-olds. And then we did numerous personal interviews, we did our own survey, and Jeff is a professor of psychology at Clark, and he ran 2 extensive polls with like 1,000 parents and 1,000 young people under the auspices of Clark. And I think the takeaway is very encouraging, even though we tend to hear these very negative stereotypes about young people. Oh, they're lazy, they're selfish, they're spoiled, so forth. But our research really pulled in another direction and emphasized the kind of generosity of a lot of young people. They volunteer in far greater numbers than any other previous generation. They're globally connected. They often have worked abroad or want to make a difference either abroad or at home in their jobs. And there is a sense of optimism, both from parents and from kids, no matter how badly things might be going. And sometimes they are kind of going badly with the churning of jobs and changes in relationships and money issues, but there is a sense that I will get what I want. Young people are saying, I really think I'm going to find a lasting partner. I believe I can find, a solid job that will also be fulfilling. And parents have a sense too that young people have even better opportunities than they did. And they certainly respect how amazingly digitally and globally connected their kids are. And what we found, and we like to reassure parents after all this research and all these conversations with the people we interviewed, is that the grown kids do grow up, and by the time they reach, it's usually about 30. For some it might be a little bit into the 30s, but they do reach those milestones, and not only the milestones, but other markers of adulthood that we found both parents and kids thought about, like taking responsibility for yourself, owning your decisions, thinking about the other person, and becoming financially self-reliant. Almost all young people will reach those milestones, and that sort of emotional centeredness, the patience and the knowledge that it will happen, I think can really help parents enjoy this period of time, because it probably won't come again when kids marry or move or whatever. It will be a very different relationship. So, enjoy the 20s.
So it's good news.
Yeah, it is.
It's
good
that.
News. We'll end on a good note.
Yeah, I think so many people are being so much more mindful and aware of their own personal journeys, so that having a little more patience and understanding,
Yes.
Perhaps than our parents were able to give us, because they didn't tread the same water. But I think that it's the least we can do for them. We brought them into this world,
Right.
We've got
Right.
we got to be patient. They're lovely. What can you do?
And many of our own values as kids of the 60s and 70s, we're passing along to our kids.
Yeah.
That sort of questioning and trying to find a path that will do something good for society, as well as being personally fulfilling, as well as being financially solvent. They learned a lot of those things from us. So
we have some residual value.
Yeah, we do.
All right, well, thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you
Really
so
nice talking
much.
to you. Everyone go out and buy that book.
I really appreciate it, and I enjoyed being on.
All right.
Thanks.
Great.